Angelo Concepcion is a comic artist from the Mays Landing, New Jersey. Angelo is a student at the Kubert School, one of the top schools for cartooning and graphic art in the United States. He's been making art since he was 2 years old, when he first discovered his father's comic books. By the age of 13, he decided to pursue this for the rest of his life. Spider-Man artist John Romita Sr. is Angelo's biggest inspiration. Is Angelo the next John Romita Sr.? Let us find out.
Welcome to another episode of Garden State of the Arts. I'm Professor Brian Sahotsky, and today I'm joined by comic book artist Angelo Concepcion. Angelo, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me here. I'm really excited to be here.
All right, so why do you consider John Romita Sr. as your biggest inspiration?
I consider him as my biggest inspiration just due to the fact that I grew up reading a lot of Spider-Man, and when you think classic, like 60s, 70s Spider-Man, John Romita Sr. is probably the artist you're thinking of. And his panel layouts, his figures, the way he draws the eye in, it's just also like awe-inspiring for me, and it's really led me to work more heavily on my art.
Could you tell us a little bit more about your process when you go on work on a project?
Absolutely. Typically, comic book artists have kind of like a three-step process. There's the layout stage, where usually it's kind of like the thumbnail sketches, that's what we call them, where it's very small, quick sketches to figure out what layout we have, the figures, how we want to draw the reader's eye. Then we take it to the rough stage, which is at a larger size. And finally, we work proportionately to the final comic book size. We either work larger or to size, and that's our final pencils. And from there, the inker can take it, and then the colorist.
So have you handed in your work to any professional studios?
Not any studios per se. I did work on a project for a friend over this past summer, and that was called the Martialists comic. I worked on the ending of issue 1 and then worked on issue 2, and currently we're in the process of getting issue 3 done.
So what's the best advice you've ever received from a professional?
It was actually this year. I went to New York Comic Con, and another Spider-Man artist, one from recent years, Alberto Ramos, he actually gave me a lot of great tips and pointers on making sure that when you do a art piece for comics especially, you have to make sure that everything feels alive. You know, you can have your characters in the foreground, you know, fighting, you know, like let's say it's Batman versus the Joker. You know, they could be fighting and they could have like the best detail, but if the background doesn't feel like Gotham City, then it starts to fall short and loses that professional quality.
Great. I think we have some imagery now to actually take a look at, and if you could actually look maybe and discuss your work a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So on the screen right now is kind of like my superhero team that I want to create, headlined by my character Big Bang. He's kind of like the young, like teenage superhero that I want to make, kind of similar to Spider-Man in that regard. And right now is a Doctor Strange piece that I'm working on because I do love to work on the pre-established characters like Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, Batman, and I always bounce back and forth between either physical or digital means. Sometimes I'll do physical pencils and inks, and then scan it and then do all the colors digitally. Sometimes I even do the inks digitally. And going back to the comic I was talking about, those are some panels and pages from what I worked on this past summer. The colorist actually dipped out on us in the last second before the book was supposed to be finished, so I had to take up all 3 roles of penciler, inker, and colorist. So personally, not some of my best work in terms of colors, but I'm still really proud of the project, and it is one of the first solo comic book issues I've managed to get printed out. And these are some currently in progress pages from issue number 3 of the Martialists comic. And that's supposed to come out either sometime in the middle or end of this upcoming summer. And here we see some of the villains for the book, a evil wizard and his 3 demon enemies / bodyguards. And some more fan art. That's a character named Khonshu from the Moon Knight comics, as well as a villain from my own creator-owned series, and another Marvel character, Man-Thing, a more horror-based character. And speaking of more Marvel, some more Spider-Man. And I try to really capture that John Romita Sr., like Steve Ditko, early Spider-Man style with this one. And there's an entire series of designs I have for it, and that page I'm inking right now is actually one that I put into that series of designs. It was Spider-Man versus the Lizard. And then that's the cover, homaging a John Romita Sr. cover, where instead of all the villains surrounding it, it's Spider-Man on the wall with the spotlight, and it's a bunch of police officers in the foreground in the original cover. And then more Spider-Man villains.
Are there any other pre-established characters that you like to work on?
I would love to work on X-Men. X-Men has always been a big influence for me, and I've been kind of working more on figuring out how to do more group shots, team building, and just figuring out good composition. And speaking of X-Men, it was just on the screen there for a split second. And the X-Men have always been a big influence for me because I just love the idea behind them. I love the social connotation behind them. It's always been a big source of inspiration.
Are there any other independent creations that you'd like to be working on right now?
Outside of my main Big Bang comic book that I want to do, there's a few characters that I have kind of waiting in the wings for me to either write scripts for or just come up with designs for. Right now I'm just kind of in the in-between stages.
Would you prefer to lead a project, or do you like to be more on the project team?
It really just depends on my schedule at the time. I really don't have too much of a preference, although most comic book artists would say that they would want to focus more on the leading aspect, just kind of come up with the story on your own, not having to worry about any restrictions, and just drawing and writing whatever you want. But also it is kind of a good exercise to work as part of a team, either as a penciler, inker, colorist, or letterer.
What's the first art piece you've professionally worked on?
First professional piece was something I did back in high school. It was a poster for our video game festival. However, in terms of comic book work, I would say the comic book I worked on this past summer, Martialists issue 2. That was the first full independent piece that I worked on practically by myself, outside of the writer.
Could you tell us a little bit about what your comic book art means to you?
Honestly, for me, when I was a kid, comic books meant everything to me. It was an escape to another world, another dimension where these fantastical things could exist and where I could breathe in just this endless font of creativity with endless stories, endless character arcs, and it's something that I want to do with my stories, and I want to influence and inspire kids like me with my work. You know, give people that escape, give people that entertainment that they crave.
Could you tell us about any projects you're currently working on then?
I'm actually currently working on Big Bang issue 1. I have a bunch of pages already penciled out, and I have the cover and the first page with me right now. And I'm hopefully going to get it out by the beginning of May. So I still have to pencil the last few pages and then go ahead and fully ink everything and letter everything. But the script's fully written. The cover's fully colored and scanned already, so it's just a little bit more work and I'll have it.
Could you tell us maybe a little bit more about your personal style? Maybe you could use these as evidence.
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to that more classic style, I like to use a lot of heavy shadows, thicker outlines for the characters, kind of to accentuate their form and to make them kind of pop out on the page more outside of the backgrounds. And I'm still working on my backgrounds. My backgrounds aren't perfect. Perspective is something I do struggle with still as a student, but I work hard to make sure everything looks as professional as possible.
Could you tell us a little bit about where we might see your artwork?
Absolutely. I don't really have any physical studio or any museum where I have anything put up, but I do have my Instagram, which is at Concepcion_studios with a Z, or you can just look up Concepcion Studios, studios with a Z at the end, .com. And my website has all my work, even some animations and animatics I worked on in previous years.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for being on the show today.
Yeah, absolutely.
And,
Thanks for having me.
We're looking forward to checking out a lot of your comic book art in probably a professional capacity and maybe on your Instagram feeds too.
All right,
So
thank you very much. Yeah.